Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going beyond the headlines. Afghanistan. It's a country that we hear about a lot, but maybe not in the ways we think. And our guide for this, the CIA World Factbook. Have you ever spent time with one of these things?
Oh, yeah. Fascinating stuff buried in those pages.
Totally agree. And today we're going to unearth some of those hidden gems about Afghanistan. I'm talking geography, people, the works. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay, so picture this. Southern Asia, landlocked country, 6 other countries bordering it. We're talking 6 times the size of Virginia. It's huge. But the really cool part, the landscape, we're talking about the Hindu Kush Mountains, right?
Yeah, the Hindu Kush, they dominate most of the country. Dramatic valleys, high altitude plateaus. It's pretty incredible.
It sounds stunning, like something straight out of, like, National Geographic, right? And
Yeah.
get this, nestled in these mountains are these crystal clear turquoise lakes. Like, seriously, how blue are we talking?
Oh, they're incredibly vivid. The fact book actually mentions Bandi Amir. It's Afghanistan's very first national park, and these lakes are phenomenal. They're separated by these natural dams made of travertine.
Travertine. Okay, I gotta ask, what's that?
So it's a type of limestone, forms from mineral springs, and over time it creates these beautiful formations like natural sculptures.
Wow. See, already learning something new. But think about this. How do those mountains affect life in Afghanistan? It can't be easy living in a place dominated by, well, mountains.
You're right. Infrastructure development, it's a challenge. It's hard to build roads and connect communities with that terrain.
Makes sense.
And because of that, many communities, they've remained pretty isolated for centuries even. And that's led to this amazing diversity of cultures and languages.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting to think about how geography can shape something like that.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Isolation preserves traditions, but it also makes development and unity, well, really difficult. And then you add in the fact book mentioning limited arable land, agriculture being tough. It's complex.
For sure. Okay, so speaking of diversity, let's talk about the people. Who are the Afghans?
Well, the fact book says getting precise data is difficult.
Right, makes sense.
But even the Constitution, it lists Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, and that's just for starters.
There are a lot of different groups there.
Definitely. And languages. Don't even get me started. Dari, Pashto, Uzbek, and more. It's super common for Afghans to be multilingual.
Really? Multilingual?
Oh, yeah. It's really a testament to history, to Afghanistan being this crossroads, this bridge between East and West. Over centuries, different empires, cultures, they've all interacted, left their mark. It's fascinating.
Wow, so it's like a linguistic melting pot in a way.
Exactly. A tapestry woven from many threads.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of interesting demographics, the fact book says the median age in Afghanistan is only 20 years old. That's young.
Incredibly. Think about it. That youthful energy, it could drive incredible innovation.
Yeah, that's a lot of potential.
It is, but it also puts pressure on resources, on education, healthcare, jobs. How do you support such a young and rapidly growing population?
That's a big question. It really makes you think about the future, doesn't it? And speaking of the future, we got to dive into Afghanistan's past. The fact book lays it all out.
A rich past it is.
Like starting way back in 1747, this guy, Ahmad Shah Durrani, he unifies the Pashtun tribes, founds modern-day Afghanistan. Talk about a legacy, right?
Absolutely. Ahmad Shah Durrani, he's considered the father of the nation. But even before him, this region was like the ultimate crossroads.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The Persian Empire, Alexander the Great, the Mughal Empire, they all left their mark on Afghanistan. It's really shaped the culture, the destiny of the entire region.
Wow. So it's like this land has always been at the center of these major power struggles.
Always.
Wow. And the fact book, it gets into this really tumultuous period. After Afghanistan gets independence from Britain in 1919, coups, communist government, and then, of course, the Soviet invasion in 1979.
Right, the Soviet-Afghan War, a major turning point, a decade of brutal conflict. The U.S. got involved, supporting the Afghan resistance fighters, the Mujahideen. It was a proxy war during the Cold War.
It's hard to believe that was, just a few decades ago? I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it's within my lifetime.
It was a pivotal moment in history, and the fact book doesn't shy away from the aftermath either.
Yeah, that was a really tough time for the region, right?
It was. Afghanistan was left deeply scarred. Devastating civil war, the rise of the Taliban.
Right.
The Taliban emerged in the early 1990s, and they imposed a really strict interpretation of Islamic law. It was a difficult time for many, especially women and girls.
Their rights were severely limited under the Taliban, weren't they?
They were. And it led to a period of isolation for Afghanistan. And tragically, it set the stage for what happened on 9/11. The fact book is very clear about this. The Taliban provided a safe haven for Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda.
Which, of course, led to the U.S.-led intervention in 2001.
Exactly. The U.S. aimed to dismantle al-Qaeda, remove the Taliban from power, and it led to a new Afghan government. Hamid Karzai became the first democratically elected president in 2004.
That was a big deal.
It was. But rebuilding a nation after decades of conflict, it's incredibly difficult, as the fact book points out.
Especially with the Taliban fighting back the entire time.
Right. Insurgency, instability, it's hard to rebuild with all that going on.
It's heartbreaking to even think about. These attempts at peace building, creating a more democratic society, all while facing this constant threat.
It really highlights the resilience of the Afghan people, though. To go through all that and still strive for a better future, it's remarkable.
I agree. And then you have the U.S.-Taliban agreement in 2020, the withdrawal of international forces, and the Taliban takes over again in August 2021. It's like, just when you think things can't get more complicated.
Those images from that time, the fall of Kabul, the desperation, the uncertainty, it was a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, the fragility of peace.
It's a lot to process. Even just reading about it in the fact book, yeah, it really makes you pause and think, you know?
It does.
It's like Afghanistan's story. It's just so much more than what we usually hear about.
Definitely.
But I'm curious, even with all of that, is there any, good news? Any signs of hope in the fact book?
You know, there are some encouraging things. Remember we were talking about mobile phone use earlier?
Yeah, that huge increase.
That's not just technology. That's a population that wants to connect, that wants to learn.
It's like a window into the future they're trying to create.
Exactly. And even though Afghanistan's facing, big economic challenges, especially with the sanctions and everything,
Right.
there's still this drive to rebuild. The fact book even mentions growing trade with China. That could be a path to recovery.
It's inspiring in a way, this resilience, this ability to adapt.
It is. And I think that's a really important takeaway from all of this. Afghanistan's story isn't over.
Yeah.
It's a country dealing with a lot, a really complex past, but it also has so much potential. They have this young population, and they're eager for the future.
That's a really good point. It reminds me that there's always more to this story.
Absolutely.
And that behind everything, the headlines, the news, there are real people.
Yeah.
With hopes, dreams, trying to make things better.
I think that's something it's easy to forget sometimes.
It is. Well, on that note, I think we've done some serious digging into the World Factbook today. We've gone from geography to, was it travertine?
Yeah.
To history, to the future. It's been a journey. But the biggest takeaway for me, the world is complicated.
Yeah.
And when we dig deeper, look beyond the surface, we get a much better understanding of, everything. The forces at play, the people living through it all.
It's about connecting the dots.
Exactly. And remember, anyone can check out the CIA World Factbook. It's available to everyone. So if something we talked about today piqued your interest, dive in. There's a whole world of fascinating stuff just waiting to be discovered. Until next time, keep exploring.